attending a antique show, and he saw a stein and he became fascinated with it. And this interest grew, and he tried to find out some information. And he remembered there was a book by somebody called Stevenson, and he went to bookstores and he tried to buy this book, and he couldn't find it, and the booksellers didn't know what he was talking about. Then he said, well, I'm going to go back to another antique show and see if I can find this book. And sure enough, he did, about 6 months later, and eventually he acquired a copy of this book. That began a 4-year intensified interest in stein collecting. He is a surgeon, but he's a laser surgeon. One of the top 7 in the country. Invited to teach at the top universities in Japan. Our speaker is going to give you an approach this morning unlike any, I think, that you've heard at one of our conventions. He's an interesting speaker, a fascinating speaker, and he's fluent in German. And it's a delight for me to introduce Dr. Nemeth.
Good morning. I certainly want to thank Dr. Colonel Kuntz for a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I'm having a wonderful time here. The hospitality from the Bayou Stein-Verein has been absolutely enormous. Because there's a lot of material to cover, I'd like to start. What I'll be covering is Hannoversch Muenden Faience. It's a faience factory in the north of Germany. And from the title slide, you can see the characteristic marking that you'll find at the bottom of these steins, the triple C. And following Al Hoch's lecture yesterday, if I were giving this talk in Germany, my title slide would be quite a bit different. Of course, everybody knows you need titles, and you're addressed with many, many more titles. What I'll be covering first is how faience was made. And what I'd like to take you through is making a faience stein together. I then want to cover the geography, some of the history of this particular factory, then address some of the misconceptions that some of you might have about Hannoversch Muenden Faience. And then, perhaps for some of you, part of the most enjoyable part of the lecture is just to see the diversity and the tremendous output, some of which I think it has a lot of quality behind it. Now, this is a slide depicting the bottom of a faience stein from Hannoversch Muenden. How do we know that? First, it's signed, it's marked. The triple C's, almost in this triangular fashion. It's not 3 C's in a row with a line. And you also notice this is artist marked. The S here standing for Georg Christoph Schaefer. And you'll notice that faience steins consist of 2 parts. Peeking through this white glaze is what is called the Scherben, the clay portion of it. First, we're going to make the clay part of the faience stein, and then we'll go on to the glaze and other aspects of it. First, the Scherben. Why do I use that particular term? What I'm referring to is the lightly sand-colored pottery clay portion of it, not the white portion of it. The reason this is important in making our stein is first we have to dig for clay. And if we're going to dig for clay, remember we don't have cranes at this period of time in the 1750s, 1780s. So we're not very, very likely to be exporting this clay from great distances. We're going, and this is true for most of the factories that produce faience in Germany, we're going to be getting this clay from the vicinity of the factory. And the reason that's important is because whether or not this sherbet, and you'll see this term in auction catalogs and elsewhere, whether or not this sherbet has a lightly sand color, a slight yellowish hue, a slight red hue, because it came from the vicinity of the particular factory, is often an important clue many advanced collectors use for attribution. Now we've dug our clay. Now we're going to take it through a process called schlemmen, which means we've got rocks in there and roots and a whole lot of junk we don't want because we're not going to have a very nice smooth finish. So we have to put this clay in settling tanks, and through a particular process of getting out the larger and larger pieces to smaller and finer, a more homogeneous type of clay substance. And in order to do that, we're also using sieves to get some of the rocks, roots, and other particles that are in there that we don't want. After that, the clay was subjected to kneading. This was either in the form of people who trampled on it by hand, by foot, or for a larger manufactory, this was simply a donkey going in a circle with a wooden gear where a piece of wood came down to knead it, pretty much like our modern bread makers today. This shows you a picture of what's called a schlemmerei, or the settling tanks, where oftentimes some of these particular tanks would be located higher, some lower, and the sieves would be in between so that the clay could go finer and finer and finer. This shows you another picture of a faience manufactory of the period. Here you see one of the particular settling tanks. Here you see a worker there trying to sieve some of this out by hand. Here, if some of the big clumps are together, he's grinding it down with a stone to make it a little bit finer and more homogeneous. Next, we take our clay and we subject it to a process that's called mauken. Now, what does that mean? It's a fermentation process, because remember, in our clay, we also have organic living substances. Wouldn't do very well for the appearance of a stein if you would have a worm that might, for example, detract from the period of your particular painting. But also, obviously, the worms would have been gotten out with sieving process, but more the smaller organic type of bacteria. Then we're going to knead it again. Why? Because during this fermentation process, we're going to develop gases in there which might bubble up the clay and obviously detract from the later appearance. All of the clay, when it's finally gone through this very, very arduous, intensive process, and I hope I've given you an appreciation for that. It wasn't just get a clay, throw it on a potter's wheel. It was very, very labor intensive. Every single piece of pottery, of faience that survived was very, very precious to these people. Next, the handles are all applied by hand, and then we're going to dry it until it achieves a leather hard consistency. And then begins the first of possible 3 firings that faience can be subjected to. This at a particular temperature of 800, 900 degrees. Before this, what we've also done is added a little bit of salicylic acid and lime to the clay. Now, why is that? Because now we just have this sandy colored piece of faience. We want to put a white glaze on it. We want to make imitation white gold. And with some of the prices for faience today, it might as well be white gold. But we want to make this imitation white gold. How are we going to get two different substances to fuse with one another in some of the firing processes? That little bit of lime puts small pores into the clay, allowing the glaze that we're later going to be putting onto it to bind and creep into those pores so that the two might become one a little bit better. This shows you a period slide depicting the potter at the wheel hand molding a piece. All right, now let's go make our stein. Now we need some glaze. It wasn't just a matter of we have this big soup that we dip in. First, we need potash and quartz sand. Some of you might recognize these are glass-like ingredients. And indeed, this is what we have at this particular stage, a glass-like substance. Why the tin oxide? That's to make it white. We're making imitation white porcelain. So now we have a white, glass-like substance, and now we bake it. It's cooked. We have a cake of glass-like substance, which we then have to break apart into smaller types of glass-like substance, which we then pulverize into a very, very, very fine powder form. And then we mix it with H2O, water, and we make a white, soupy type of glaze that now we finally can dip our faience products into. This is an actual picture of the glazing mill from Hannoversch Muenden. And you see, this is where the glaze-like mass would be ground and pulverized. Here, a slide depicting a gentleman dipping the product into the glaze brew, so to speak, or it could be applied for some larger pieces with a brush and just sprayed on. Then it was set aside to very, very lightly dry. Now I'd like to address the next topic of making our faience stein, which is painting it. One of the many misconceptions I've heard from many collectors is that, I always thought this was like a Metlock blank and then we painted on it. No. After the glaze was put on, and I've termed this wet glaze. It wasn't actually wet. They did let it dry out a little bit till it had a fine powdery substance. But it wasn't a fired piece at this time point. Then it was painted with what is called scharf Feuerfarben. Sharp fire colors, high fire colors. These things are going to be cooked at a tremendous temperature, up to 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's approaching 1,952 degrees Fahrenheit. What this means is that our palette is limited. And the overwhelming majority of faience steins that you see, with the exception of perhaps some of them in museums, are these scharf Feuerfarben, the high temperature colored pieces. Those are colors like green, manganese, yellow, blue, cobalt blue. For some factories, a color called iron red, black, for example. But those are the particular colors and the only colors that can withstand these high temperatures. That's why those are the colors you see on all of the majority of the faience steins. Any other color at these temperatures would be cooked off or blackened. For the moment, I'd like you to ignore these two because that would only confuse the issue at this time. We're making our typical overwhelming majority faience stein that all of us see. This shows you again a period slide from the period. The painters, now again it's been dipped in the glaze, slightly dried, and given to the painters for painting. Now we need to fire our piece. First, we place it in a kiln. And remember, this isn't a big iron stove. You open the hatch and we put them in. This took days to achieve, many days to achieve. This was so important, just where you put it, Certain areas, through trial and error, people knew you put the first firing pieces, because remember, all three stages that we'll be talking about are going to be going on at the same time in certain areas. Muffle fired pieces are going to go in. They're placed here. Just the stacking was very, very important. Then, over the area where the wood is being stoked, there's no gas, there's coal, or at this particular time, there's an area that's called the Bren room. This is where we're stacking our faience and placing it very, very meticulously, because the outcome is going to depend on where you put it. Then we get our bricklayers. We wall up the whole thing. And then we start our pre-firing. 15 to 16 hours. One of the most important people in a faience manufactory was the actual guy chucking the wood in there. And then comes the big fire, where the really, really high temperatures are achieved at 12 to 14 hours. And then this Bren room here has some avenues where some of the smoke, etc., can escape. So in order to achieve a slow annealing of the faience product, these holes are plugged up to allow slow cooling, so that the faience doesn't develop eggshell type cracking or actual breaks in the particular piece. This shows you a picture at the time. This is where a lot of the wood, etc., is put. This would be the area of the Bren room up here, where the faience had already been placed and then walled up. Now I want to remind you again of what the Scharfeuer, the high temperature colors, are. This is a Hannoversch Muenden Faience. The owner's name, Johann Martin Krug, dated 1782, in this cartouche with cherubs on either side. This is from the Kestner Museum in Hanover. But notice again the colors. There's not bright reds in this, the high temperature colors. The manganese, here predominantly green, yellow, little bit of blue. Here, for example, a plate that they also made, depicting the typical high temperature colors: the blue, the manganese, the yellow, the green. Here, a tureen. Now, what about muffle-fired pieces? Some of you have heard about that. Now we've taken through the production of a high-temperature faience piece. Well, we can also take our faience piece that we've dipped in the particular glaze and not paint it at all, as sort of a blank, and fire that in along. And then on this finished blank, now the glaze is already bound to the faience piece. We can have one of our own artists in the factory, or we can send it out to an independent artist, the so-called house maulers, to paint with what's called muffle or muffle-fired colors. These are colors like red, orange, purple. You notice this is a much, much broader palette. Nuances can be gotten. You can mix particular colors along with them. But these colors won't withstand the high temperatures of this. So they have to be protected in what's called a muffle or chamot capsule. It's a particular capsule into which the faience pieces that have now been painted are placed, and then the whole thing, the faience in the capsule, and the capsule then goes in the kiln, are then placed alongside all the rest of it, and they only get lower temperatures. That's the reason for putting them in these capsules, to protect those colors that would otherwise burn off. This is obviously a much more labor-intensive process. That's why muffle-fired pieces, the colored type pieces or house mauler pieces, often demand the exorbitant prices that they do today. What else can we do with our faience sign? We can have a blank, And we can take that blank out and not even bother with it anymore, not even have bothered with it having been painted before it was fired, and simply just paint on it. Those are the cold-fired pieces, so-called cold-fired pieces. Many of these, the painting is practically gone or is worn off because it is not fired on. This is a depiction of a muffel or a chamut capsule, and you see the faience sign. This is in cross-section, the faience inside one of these capsules, and then how the capsule would be taken in this form and then placed in the kiln for that third low-temperature fire. This is an example of a muffel-fired piece. This is not from Hannoversch Muenden, but from a factory in the vicinity called Braunschweig or Brunswick. It depicts a harlequin. Harlequins were very popular at the time. And you notice in his hand, he has what's in German called a Pritsche. In English, a slap stick. Where is Hannoversch Muenden located? It's difficult to see from this angle, but I believe this is Cologne, and down this vicinity, Frankfurt am Main, which is the major airport into which many of you have, I'm sure, flown in. And then you see Hannoversch Muenden located in the center, and its particular neighbors, Rispig-Holzen and Braunschweig, or Brunswick, in this portion of Germany, which is also known as Lower Saxony. Here depicting a map of the particular period. Again, you see Hannoversch Muenden, its location to its neighbors, Rispig-Holzen, and also Braunschweig. This is important because oftentimes attribution of particular pieces are very, very difficult because painters move. They get more salary here, they're going to go there, and they're going to take their decorations with them. And that's in part what makes attribution of a particular piece for unsigned pieces sometimes difficult. You'll also notice that Hannoversch Muenden was very, very well located at this junction here between the three rivers. And this is a map of the period showing the factory garden. This is the Werra River, Weser River, and this is the Fulda River. This location is important because after pieces are done, shipping becomes much more easier by river at this time than by overland. This is a time graph. It's very, very, it might seem confusing on the interest. What is up on this axis is the particular dates, starting the early 1700s, outwards over to 1800s. And here at number 22 is Hannoversch Muenden, and you'll see that they were not one of the early factories to start. They were not one of the late. They were sort of in the middle. And they lasted up to over 100 years into 1854. That's important because over such a long production time, you're going to see a whole lot of differences in the particular techniques. This shows you the coat of arms from the von Hanstein family, C.F. von Hanstein. And you see that the three C's of the signature are derived from the waning moons. They're not C's, they're actually a waning moon. So what about the history of the factory? Some attribute the beginnings of the factory to 1732. We know, at least at this time, it may have existed in the form of a pipe factory. Certainly, there's a dated piece in the Kestner Museum in Hanover of 1753. There are very, very good, some good data that certainly perhaps also as early as 1947. It's a controversial subject, but somewhere in here is certainly the beginnings of the factory as founded by Carl Friedrich von Hanstein. A privilege or a license was granted by George II, who of course was King of England, an elector of Hanover at the time, in 1755. In 1775, when Carl Friedrich died, his son, Carl Johann Friedrich von Hanstein, took over. In 1786, there was a report to the Hannover's Council of Commerce. Now what's going on in this particular period as we're getting on to the turn of this particular century? Remember, porcelain is already being produced in Germany. Bürki has already invented it. English stoneware is being imported into the country. It's cheap. People are buying it. Von Hanstein is worried at this time. He would like tariffs increased to keep or make the English stoneware products more expensive. He actually wants a faience lottery. It's very interesting how things are pretty much similar in history. Pretty much like carnival glass was given away at carnivals to generate interest. His hope was that a faience lottery would generate interest in his faience and he could sell more of it. Both requests were denied. What I also have here from you is a slide of the original report from the particular time. And to translate this, and I think this is very interesting, and many of you may not know this, it says, the Faience and English Stoneware Factory. They actually produced their own type of English stoneware also at that particular time. It was competition, business. You made what people wanted. This shows you a particular list of employees at the time. At some of its heyday, there were about 128 people employed at the factory. And you notice the particular painters, there were men, women, and also children that were involved as Maler or painters. Children perhaps would be there to put on some of the manganese sponge decorations that you see on some of the jumping horse scenes. And then you also see here, again, an attribution that English stoneware was definitely also produced at this factory, or a type of English stoneware. This is an actual price list from 1786, and you can see pretty much like Anton Post's book on Metlock, etc. You can see in relation to, for example, this Topf, that in the currency of the time in Hessen Kurant, that would be an expensive piece, 7 Hessen, whatever denomination of the time, and a Krug would cost you 4 in that particular denomination of the time. And now things start getting turbulent. 1793, they've already been producing some stoneware in order to compete. Ernst Karl Friedrich von Hanstein now inherits the particular factory, but he's not very much interested in this. So he sells it off to Lieutenant Falkmann for about 32,000 thaler. But Lieutenant Falkmann can't come up with all of it, so he only comes up with half of it, and the rest of it's sort of given on a loan basis. But he's not very successful. 1808, Johann Baptist Hack takes over. 1809, the sister of one of the previous owners takes over, who was married to a certain Gladbach. 1827, the widow of Ernst C.F. von Hanstein buys it back, because remember, she hasn't gotten her full portion of that other half of the 32,000 thaler back. She's trying to save that money, so she's hoping maybe I can get some of this money before it's lost. She's unsuccessful, and Georg Ernst Wüstenfeld takes over in 1829. He has big plans saying, oh, we have these wonderful verse scenes, etc. I can expand the factory. Maybe I really can make money at this after all. But unfortunately is unsuccessful, and it's closed in 1854. Now some of you may look at all of this and say, boring, dates, dumb names, never remember it anyway. Get what is important out of all of this, which is not the particular name or the date, but what's going on in the period. A stable period. Your factory is flourishing. You can hire the best possible painters. The scenes are going to be tremendous. In all of this turbulence, that's not going to be possible. So the particular scenes that you're going to have on that particular faience are not going to be of the top quality. And that'll explain to you why some of these particular pieces are not as desirable or desired by collectors as some of the other pieces. Now Now I'd like to address the issue of misconceptions about Hannoversch Muenden. I know Hannoversch Muenden, a jumping horse. Yeah, that's Hannoversch Muenden, a jumping horse. And that's Hannoversch Muenden, a jumping horse. That's the jumping horse factory. Oh yeah, and some of the scenes aren't so hot. Here's a bird on a tree stump. Remember I was talking about children who might be painting at this time, or some of the other people. This is what they would be painting. You don't want your top quality artists wasting their time sponging on manganese. That would be left to some of the apprentices, perhaps children, perhaps some of the men, some of the women at the time. A house. Yep. Colored stripes. And then, of course, the verses. If it's not a jumping horse, or if it's a verse, it must be Hannoversch Muenden. This one says, Prost, Freund. Prosit, friend. Seid lustig und trink. Be happy, be lustig, and drink. Yep, that's Hannoversch Muenden. And of course, the Kralsheim, the Ansbach, the Schretzheim collectors turn their nose up. That's the jumping horse. The verse factory. Es lebe die Braut, long live the bride. Hannoversch Muenden. Of course, if there's something for the bride, there's Prost Bräutigam, prosit to the groom, prosit to the friend, auf dein Wohlsein, to your health. But many of you are not aware that this also was Hannoversch Muenden. Here a tremendous scene of a woman sicking a dog on this gentleman, and he's raising his cane in self-defense. But what about this? Oh, a verse. That must be Hannoversch Muenden. It's not. This is Kralsheim. And what about this? That's not Hannoversch Muenden either. Schretzheim. What about this? Schretzheim. Kralsheim. Verses, huh? With Schretzheim, with Kralsheim. What about this? We have Durlachen here, we have Offenbach, we have Mosbach. Every factory did this. They were popular. It was a business. These things sold. Every single factory in some form or another did this. This is an Ansbach piece, 1769. If your public wanted their name with the date on it, you sold it to them. You gave them what they wanted. This is one of my favorite sayings. It says, Jungfernlieb und Wein soll mein Vergnügen sein. Virgins' love and wine shall be my pleasure. I hope you're not confused. What I've tried to do up to this point is broaden your concept of what Hannoversch Muenden made and what other ones made, other factories made. What about attribution? What clues do we have? How do we know a piece is Hannoversch Muenden and not some other piece? Other factory. This is from Otto Riesebeter, which is a fantastic must-standard reference in order to really sort out the attributions. If a piece is signed, at the bottom, here you see the 3 C's from the waning half moon of the von Hanstein coat of arms. We know it's definitely from Hannoversch Muenden. There's no doubt about it. Furthermore, if you see the 3 C's with an E under it, or these funny letters, what do these funny letters mean? Those are the artist's initials. That will tell you Hannoversch Muenden, the 3 C's, that's Erhard, that's Muck, that's Pielke, that's Schaefer. Those are the artists. There's no doubt. No matter how funny, how different the decoration may be, here there is no doubt as to the attribution. The room just belched. Too much beer. What about this? Somebody should do something about the plumbing. What about this particular piece? A jumping horse, Hannoversch Muenden. It's not. This is Lesum. It's signed. It even has a signature G for Caspar Grote, G-R-O-T-E. This, a jumping horse. Hannoversch Muenden, it's not. It's signed. It's Braunschweig. Notice here, in this particular decoration, this is from a famous Sammlung Birsch, the cartouche around it, this blue with a particular black line, this was attributed to Hannoversch Muenden. What about this piece? Jumping horse. There's the blue, black. This is signed in 3 C's. Hannoversch Muenden, we know this for sure. But what about this piece? You'll have to take my word for it in this black and white. This is blue, this is black. Is this Hannoversch Muenden? It's signed W.R. Risberg-Holtzen. This is a Risberg-Holtzen piece. This is blue, this is black, jumping horse, signed W.R. Another Risberg-Holtzen piece. Remember those neighbors? So you can see some of the problems of attribution from a factory or to a particular factory. And I'd like to give you that information. Particular decoration is often one of the weakest time points on which you can base an attribution. What are some of the clues then for some Hannoversch Muenden pieces to help you out if they're not signed? Here, a wonderful sign showing 2 Rococo lovers kissing. And one of the things I want you to notice here at the bottom, which was typical of Hannoversch Muenden, is that they weren't just yellow. They had this black stripe alongside it. You see that? That's typical. It doesn't say if it has this black stripe next to it, it is Hannoversch Muenden on an unsigned piece. It's just typical of the decoration. Often you'll also see typical of the particular factory is this hill on the side with this palm tree. Here you see it again, this hill with the palm tree at the side of the sign. Here another sign, hill with the palm tree. Typical. Doesn't mean it is, just typical. Another particular clue from here in this particular artist, you'll notice this little creature here, if you ever should run across this plate in a flea market. This Kranich, or flying crane. This was typical of the factory. Those type of little things help attribute a particular piece to the factory. What I'd now like to do is go through, show you some of the things from the Kestner Museum, along with some of the pieces that fellow collectors graciously sent me to share with you. Now, this slide is not recent. This is from the 1930s. One of the things when I went visiting in Hannoversch Muenden recently, as a typical tourist with camera in hand, I wanted to take pictures of palaces and all of these beautiful, wonderful buildings. And I didn't take a picture of anything. Hanover was very, very unfortunate in World War II. And not only was it bombed, but the rubble was bombed, and the rubble of the rubble was bombed. So these are not 1930 pieces. These are recent. These are pieces that have survived. And you'll see that because of the tremendous destruction in that particular area, like much of the destruction all over Germany, some of the things I'll be showing you from the Kestner Museum are actually the best examples that are in existence. And here's that Stein I was telling you about from dated 1753, F.F. Jervis. This is from the Kestner Museum. What I want to do is just show you a palette of all the different decorations that the factory made. Here in cartouche, flowers. Here a hunting scene. Stag, dog, sniffing the stag's trail. You might as well just look up and you can see him. And of course the hunter. Here in a cartouche, a woman with a horn of flowers, a cornucopia of flowers. Again, for the Metlock collectors out there, no thumb lift doesn't seem to bother people. Here what I call some monochrome colors. Again, a Rococo pear. Notice again the typical decoration, the palm trees on the side that are on a hill. Chinese scene. And now I'd like to get into some particular artists that are artist-type pieces. First, Johann Christoph Muck died at a very, very early age. We know from about 89 to 96 he worked at the factory. And here you see an example from the Kessler Museum of this gentleman sort of shadow dueling with this straw bundle, the cape draped over his arm. And here an example of a harlequin straw dueling with another harlequin with a slapstick. Apparently there are 3 known examples in 3 museums that are known to exist where the 2 figures come together. And signed on the bottom, artist Mark M. for Muck. Have the next slide, please. Next artist, Peter David Pielke. We know he worked at the factory 1768 to 91. A horse scene. But if we look at the bottom, the 3 C's and a P, whether this was Pielke or perhaps someone else with a P, we believe it to be Pielke. But again, over a short range, perhaps he started. This is one of the early things he did. Here also you see a much more intricate design from the Kessler Museum. And notice the similarities. Here, jumping horse, but notice this cartouche, the crown, the birds looking away on the side. And this piece in color, notice again the particular cartouche, the similarities, crown, the 2 birds looking at the side. Look how fantastic this piece is. A gorgeous, gorgeous piece. It's not just jumping horses and verses. Again, factory sign and artist sign with a P. Here again you see the typical Scherben. And that's the glazed part at the bottom. That's what we're looking at, the bottom of the stein. Another Pielke piece in full color depicting a dog hounding a stag. Another Pielke piece, tremendous terrain. Asmus Friedrich Zimmermann, 1774-1791. Unbelievable piece. The reason I'm stopping in between is also for the particular people who will be viewing the video, so the slides just don't jump, and they'll also have the opportunity to see them. Also a Zimmermann piece from the Kessler Museum that survived the Second World War. Notice this tremendous scene here. Dog biting the gentleman in the calf. Notice the fence work here. It's sort of lying down. No lid. Yes?
You showed earlier the dish and the bowl, the covered bowl.
Yes.
Something like that compared to the stein.
Much more expensive. Much more expensive. Some of the potpourri vases for which they were noted were just outstanding, and not only in their particular price, but in their workmanship. Well, many of them were double-walled, where, as you know, everything was done by hand. And that network, there was an inner type of wall, and then that all had to be cut out in order to get that particular network. Tremendous work involved. Zimmermann piece. Also notice from the decoration. This is a signed Zimmermann piece. And yet, Georg Christoph Schaefer, we know that he existed and at least was around in 1789. And the only reason we know this is thanks to the outstanding scholarship of Otto Riesebeter, who in 1920 had access to much of this material before it became Kriegsverlust, or lost in the war. And Georg Christoph Schaefer had a fully signed piece, not only by an initial, but by his full name, which he dated Muenden, 10th of June, 1789. Unfortunately, this piece is no longer in existence, but was also lost during the Second World War. These pieces, of course, you would then expect would be exceedingly rare. An example that survived the Second World War from the Kestner Museum, no lid. We look at little tiny flakes, cracks, chips, etc. But a beautiful, beautiful scene of a Rococo pair with the gentleman playing the flute. And notice what's typical. Remember, I alluded to the fence in the Zimmermann decoration. Notice what's typical is, look at this fence work here with the post work here. And here, another signed Georg Christoph Schaefer piece depicting the Zimmermann scene, or perhaps the Zimmermann scene is depicting the Schaefer scene. As you could imagine, a scene like this would be very, very popular with the public. So it is very, very possible that more than one painter in the factory was put to work to do this particular scene. Again, on the side, the hill with the palm tree. Look at the beauty of colors here, the richness of the blue. And these are those typical posts of the fence work that's characteristic, I believe, for Schaefer pieces. Look at the detail in the garment of the Rococo gentleman. Just outstanding. Here, close-up of the woman who's saying to the dog, "Sick, go get him." He insulted me. Beautiful attempt here to give the three-dimensionality in the particular painting. There's the dog bites this gentleman in the calf. And the gentleman, as he raises his cane, trying to defend himself. He probably believed that plate that said "Virgin's love and wine is going to be my pleasure," and she said, "Go get him." And of course, sign, CCC, and the artist's signature, the S, for Georg Christoph Schaefer. And what's also very, very nice is that the pewter date here of 1787, pewter's original, very much corresponds with the time. And here, Rococo period. Notice again the particular post, very typical in Schaefer scenes, these two lovers that are kissing. There's again the hill with the palm tree off here to the side. And again, this is signed S, 3 C's of Hannoversch Muenden, that's the bottom of that sign. And this lid is dated 1796. It's actually interesting. Number one, it points out one of two things. Pewter marks and pewter dates are probably not one of the best things in order to date your particular signs. It's nice when they correspond, or perhaps it can mean something else. Perhaps Schaefer actually lived longer. That, of course, would merely be conjecture. And again, showing you a very, very nice medallion inset in the pewter lid of this piece. And then I'd like to finish just a brief, very, very brief overview of some of the diversity of production in addition to steins. A character stein, if you will. Here, a gentleman sitting on a branch, the little hill. This branch coming up is actually the spout. And here he's holding a beaker in his right hand. No, this is not a character cabbage. It's a tureen. But look at the diversity of production. What I'd really like to leave you with is a feel that it was not just jumping horses, not just verses. Beautiful covered terrain. Here, a different metal oxide than the tin oxide was added to that glaze to give it the blue finish when they wanted to. Just an example of the diversity of production. And this is one of those potpourri vases. Just fabulous. And again, I show these, there may be some people in the audience who are also interested in seeing the breadth of production in addition to steins. Look at the plastic, the three-dimensionality to the work here. Here another plate. This was typical at the crossing points of this network to have the flowers of blue that are yellow in the middle. Here, fabulous figural lion's feet to this keg, the fish head. If you look at it quickly, it almost looks like a tortoise with Bacchus, with a beaker sitting atop. This is the crier from mid-18th century. What he is saying here is, hola, faience here. It's amazing to think that once upon a time, people would actually come to your door to try to almost give their faience away, to sell it to you. Certainly these things have changed nowadays as we... that'll be my last slide. I very much thank you for your attention. You've been a most gracious audience. I hope I've been able to broaden a little of your scope in terms of faience production, history of this factory, and what it produced, and clear up some misconceptions that it wasn't just a jumping horse first type factory. Thank you again for your patience.
Any questions?
The question was, I'm going to be repeating the question for the videotape. The question was, did they apply the colors one at a time and then fire it? The whole piece would be painted first with the sharp fire colors, high temperature colors, and then when the painting was completed, it would be put in the kiln and then fired. Yes, ma'am? The question was, is it known why the jumping horse was such a popular theme? Horses were integral at the particular time. It was called a Welfisch Ross. People knew it, people loved it. It's much like many of our children today see God knows what in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but everybody wants one. And if everybody wants one, and it was so extremely popular, much of it was produced. Much of Metlock, some of the most outstanding Metlock steins, the St. Florian stein, for example, with the dragon handle. Beautiful stein, but everybody wanted it. It was so fantastic. So we see it more often than not at auction. You're welcome. Any other questions? John?
On some of the ones that were signed there, Schaefer, Zimmerman, etc., did they also do the background work, not the sponge part, but let's say the trees on the side, they concentrated on the center scene, or typically they have done the entire scene, all the parts?
The question was, some of the sign pieces, Schaefer, Zimmerman, et al., would they do the entire decoration, just the front decoration, some of the background scenes? I don't think that's known. I at least don't know it, and I don't think it is known how that was done. In looking at the particular brush strokes from the frontal part of the scene to the particular side, they do seem similar, and it would be my humble opinion that the entire sign would have been painted by the one particular artist.
One more back here, Albert.
Do you have any information on the factory at Krauss?
Do I have any information on the factory of Kreilsheim? Yeah, many people do. It was a very, very nice factory. There are many, many nice factories. Thank you again.
Not appearing on your schedule, Jim Stevenson needs 3 minutes of your time. Jim? He needs 2.
We just learned that there's a lot of noises during Dr. Nemeth's speech. That was Tom McGuire burping out in the corridor. Tom will have to apologize after. I'm here, I asked to be, I guess they forgot, which is okay, to speak earlier about the get-together in Springfield, Mass. I'll have these registration forms on my table at 1 o'clock. Be sure that some representative from your Stein group takes a few of these to bring back to your July and August and September meetings, and you can make copies at the meeting and hand them out to everybody. In November, the Student Prince Group will sponsor a weekend. It'll be like the one we had in Corning. I went to Corning. We thought it was great. We had a great time. We saw friends, and the camaraderie that we usually have at the meetings was great. So there's an itinerary on the registration form. It'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, November 18, 19, and 20. There's an airport in Connecticut close by. Friday night we'll all be together, drinking beer, coffee, soda, pretzels, pizza, Steins in the room. Saturday we'll be viewing private Stein collections. And there'll be other things to do. If you'd like to break up the day, we'll be having dinner at the Harbor House or Student Prince. These restaurants are loaded with antique beer steins, plus the great German food. And Sunday, Gary Kersner will conduct an auction at 12 noon right at the hotel. It's the Marriott, beautiful hotel, downtown Springfield, $59 a room. Cost $25 per single, which will cover expenses for us on Friday night. Your beer and all that will be taken care of. So everything else is on the sheet. We're hoping for a crowd maybe of 100 to 150 to include hopefully all the members of the Student Prince group. If you have any questions, I'll be down in the Stein room this afternoon. I'm trying to get in there for 1, but it could be like 1:15. So hopefully, if I'm a few minutes late, just wait for me. I have something to take care of during the noon hour. Okay, thank you very much.
In our group, we have a collector and an author who's been into Steins before God.
And all that sort of thing, but they love every minute of it. And there are all kinds of different crews. You'll hear, now tonight you're going to see a ladies' crew. They have men's crews, ladies' crew, and family crews. Social season is an extremely important part of Mardi Gras here. And this is when the young debutantes are presented to society, and they're maids and queens in the different balls that are organized by male leaders in the community. And a family is very, very important in New Orleans society for your daughter to be presented as a maid. Families may spend up from $25,000 to $50,000, much more than they would spend on their daughter's wedding. But there is this is tradition for them. And it's also, I don't know if you've been in the restaurants where you see red beans and rice on the menu. Well, the legend says the reason we eat red beans and rice every Monday is because people have to save their money. And because they've got to pay for these parties somehow. And that's why you eat red beans and rice every week. There's a song that is typical, and actually it personifies Mardi Gras, and that's If I Ever Cease to Love. And I know that, I'm sure Jimmy will play that tonight. There are two lines, I think, that are interesting in the song. It says, if I ever cease to love, may fish get legs and cows lay eggs, if I ever cease to love. And this is just typical of the Mardi Gras mentality. And tonight we're presenting, as I told you before, this mini Mardi Gras ball, and our orchestra is Jimmy Maxwell's. He is nationally renowned, and I'm sure some of you have been in his club. He has Maxwell's Toulouse Cabaret in the Quarter, and he plays for all the top balls in the city, including the Rex Ball. And Rex is the king of carnival, and he's crowned on Mardi Gras Day. The crew of Shangri-La is the largest women's crew in the metropolitan area, and the captain, or the boss lady, is Mary Catherine Lenatre. She's a dear friend of mine, and it is a pleasure to present her to you now. I think she's really going to imbue you with the spirit of Mardi Gras. Yes, Patsy. Right now, it is a pleasure to introduce Mary Catherine Lenatre, the captain of Shangri-La.
We hope you enjoy what you're about to see tonight. Shangri-La is reportedly the largest ladies' carnival club in the city of New Orleans, and we feel that we are a very democratic carnival club. From our membership, once you are a member for 1 year, we draw a random drawing where 6 ladies are selected made at no extra cost other than their dues, which are only $200, and the queen also comes from our membership. When we say crew, you think of C-R-E-W. In New Orleans, it's K-R-E-W. My position as captain is to design the ball, write the script, coordinate the music, and make sure everyone looks wonderful and has a fun time. Each year, we pick a different theme. This year, we're saluting the performing arts. We're now going to give you our merrymaking, a small portion of our merrymaking crew, and we want you all to be a part of this, so you can't just sit back and say, what are these people doing? You have to holler. You want beads if you want to bring home beads and doubloons and cups. So we have all kinds of goodies to give you, and we hope you enjoy. And then before it's all over, I understand you all have these napkins. Well, these are second line napkins, and we're going to show you how it's done in New Orleans. So without further ado, my show. We have to sing some music for the group. I won't go into details. I think you all are just too riled up. So our first maid. Cultural differences, family pressures are all elements of a love affair between people from different worlds. Many musical dramas were written on this theme of the love affair between Lieutenant Pinkerton and Cho-Cho San, our interpretation of a down butterfly.
gonna blend right in there. What? I'm gonna try to get one.
Let's give him a big hand. This is your royalty. Now, Gala Chairlady will go first and receive her gift. Wife of the Gala Chairman. Thank you. And Mr. Mitchell, receive a token of appreciation from our queen. And I would personally like to acknowledge Colonel Hoover and Carol Lehouse. Please stand up. These are really dedicated people. Now our crew at a normal carnival ball, which is this capsule inside, the ladies, being this is the ladies' organization, will go into the audience and pick a gentleman to have a short dance with. Normally at the ball, these ladies have masks on, so you don't really know who gave you the call out. But tonight you will get an idea. Unfortunately, without collars, the court cannot dance, but the crew will come out and we'll do 2 short call-out dances, and then we'll show
We're gonna dance the Celtic now. That's how it was.
authority to turn the lights up. Keep working on it. You're not there yet. Move the switch down that turns the lights on. Maybe that was the problem. All right, viewed from above, if Patsy will start this circle of people slowly walking around in a circle. From the looking down on it now, clockwise. It'll move people to my left in front of our stand so that our judges can size up the merchandise. That napkin won't hurt. That might add a point or two. Now, Francis, if you and Al will look at the list, there are 11 categories. So, if you'll start moving, do we need cadence? Cadence exercise. 2, 3, 4. Doesn't want to start it. Just slowly start moving, please. Come on, Patsy. We're going to do the calling out of award keys the way you do it in a dog show. If that's all right with everybody. Let's hear that voice of yours. What happened to Patsy? Judges are working the problem now. Keep moving. We don't want to make awards to any inanimate objects. There's a fellow that looks like my rabbi. You might find that interesting. While Mardi Gras has its roots in a lot of things, it's basically a religious celebration, but we have Keep moving around so our judges can see that you're alive. I think the next time we'll put a bar at the end. A little terminal stimulant.
You see the pregnant nun down here with the devil? Oh, gosh, no.
That's right.
There you go.
Travel music, right. Our judge is making progress. I did have a difficult time choosing several of the categories.
Well, Glenna said, my wife said it was kind of sacrilegious. She said a sacrilegious nun, but I didn't know why.
These crews that you keep hearing about are, in most part, private clubs. And the members are chosen by a board or a group whose responsibility is to keep the membership up. And the number is usually set by practical limits on facilities and the like. And so we have a wide range of central interests among the different groups. But every one of them that I know of has one thing in common, and that is they take their money. But you get more back for it than you give, I can tell you. They're making choices.
We would get everybody to come up this way in a line. We'll give out the presents. Or either way, come on this way. This is the most contrasting theme. And more than two.
I'll get it on one page.
Here's the best couple. Bobby. female right here.